Well, hello everyone and welcome to a very wintry episode of Wild Your Garden. As you can see, I'm in fully fledged winter mode. The beard, this has come out a little bit, but it's winter. We all need a bit of extra weight to keep us warm. Anyway, we're certainly here in the UK. Anyway, in today's video, I want to talk to you all about some of the things you can do to help wildlife in your garden around your wildlife pond. And I'm here and I'm delighted to be back in South Wales with my good friend Phil, where I created, you've probably seen this, if you haven't, I'll put a link in at the end of this video, the creating of, or the making of this urban wildlife pond here in Wales, and it was absolutely brilliant. It was a hand dig job, so it was a little bit hard work, but it was absolutely fantastic. And as you can see, even now in the depths of winter, we're well into December now, this thing is looking spectacular. And as I say, in this video I want to talk to you about some of the ways in which you can maintain your wildlife pond and what you should be looking to do at this time of year, because the same with a wildflower meadow, it's easy for us to think everything's looking a bit scruffy, let's just cut it all back. It's kind of ingrained in us, it's what we've been used to for a few centuries now here in the UK, and I think we need to escape the habit of getting everything tidied up as soon as we get into October, November and things start looking a little bit kind of bleak, shall we say. But I think at this time of year it's absolutely vital, and I'm going to show you why it is important to have some vegetation for all the wildlife. Now, in the pond here, we've got some really good features, and a lot of the features that you will have seen me making over the last couple of years on the channel. And I should say as well, guys, if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, and it really does help the channel. It helps spread the word, it helps with all the algorithms of YouTube, and it really does encourage more people. It helps get this message across, it helps to see or to push these videos to a wider audience all around the world, and that's the whole ethos behind the channel, is to help you guys create as many habitats for wildlife as we can, and that is worldwide. It doesn't stop here in the UK. These methods can be replicated wherever you are in the world. So without further ado, let's look at some of the features of this wildlife pond and why it is absolutely teeming with life and what you should be doing. Now, if we look first off at the shallow end. Now, those of you that have been watching the videos for a while will have heard me talking about cobble beaches and access for wildlife 24/7, 365 days of the year. And this pebble beach is a really good example of that. And it's one that Phil has kept free of vegetation, and it's one that I'd encourage you to do the same, because it allows access 24/7, because he's even had hedgehogs, that's right, hedgehogs, which are sadly declining here in the UK, visiting the edges of the pond to drink. So it's a really good source of water for them, especially through the summer months when, you know, water is a lot more scarce, of course, for our wildlife when everything is so hot, given the extreme heat we had this year in the UK, where we got to 41 degrees or something, absolutely just stiflingly hot. So you can only imagine what it must have been like for the wildlife. So access to water all year round is vital, even in the winter months. And today we've got just a very slight touch of frost on the water itself, but that will of course thaw out as the sun gets up, and they'll still be able to bathe and drink, all the birds, etc. But that's the next point, is the birds then need to be able to bathe and drink as well. So bathing is a big part of a bird's life cycle. So it's not just water as a drinking source. It enables them to keep clean and keep all the mechanisms of the feathers and everything in tip-top shape, because obviously they use it as a waterproof coat. So they need to have their feathers in as good a condition as possible. So bathing is really good for the birds, and it helps keep them cool as well in the summer months. So the pebble beach I would encourage you to keep clear. Now, there's a couple of things which we do have, which are things like this brook lime, which you can see are really doing very well. I'm sure Phil won't mind me removing this small piece here, but you can see, let's break a bit off. This brook lime has like a lovely stringy root structure underneath it, which obviously it spreads by runners. Things like the wild strawberries here in the UK are very similar. They'll spread by runners, and this stuff can create a bit of a mat. So pop him back in. I would recommend just keeping on top of that. You can see the brook lime there is actually creating a bit of a mat, and if you're not careful it can spread to create quite a big mat. So again, you can be pretty ruthless with this stuff. You can almost sort of rip and tear it out. It won't have too much of an effect on it. As you can tell, we're in an urban environment. We've got the traffic just over the wall, but it's absolutely teeming with life, this garden. And I should say, if you want to know more about this wildlife garden, I will be revisiting the garden in hopefully April, May next year, 2023, when I hope to do a full video on the wildlife garden as a tour and show you all the key elements, because this garden is pretty special. And if you just pan up now to the top of the buddleia, case in point, we've got many starlings that visit this garden. And when I was making the wildlife pond, it was absolutely teeming with them. And the sparrows as well. The house sparrows, which are on the red list, they're declining here in the UK. I know in the States you guys say, what are you talking about? They're a pest species, and in a lot of countries on the continent they are certainly more prolific, but here they're declining, they're losing their nesting sites. So it's wonderful to see multiple sparrows. And that starting, look at that, sorry, but just the plumage on that starling in the corner of the garden now. He's in full winter plumage there, the gorgeous white speckles on his chest, absolutely fabulous bird. Anyway, this garden I'm going to be doing a full video on in terms of exactly what's in the garden, what wildlife it attracts, and all the kind of tips and techniques that I can bring you guys to help you create this, which is in effectively not even 50 square meters. And the silver birch has now got a few sparrows sat in it as well, which Phil planted a couple of years ago. This is soon turning into a garden tour rather than a wildlife pond how-to. Anyway, it's great to see. So, and the reason these birds are here is because we have the cover. So if we move on to the next point with the wildlife pond, you can see the margins of this pond. Phil has very bravely, I know it's difficult to break out of the norm and think, right, let's leave the vegetation, but look at the stems, look at the seeds that are then on offer, from everything from the common fleabane, the purple loosestrife, the hemp agrimony, the lesser knapweed, of which I've just recently posted a photo on Twitter, which got quite a really good response, because there were some goldfinches that actually visited the lesser knapweed because they're eating the seeds. So the seeds of these plants that were providing all the nectar and pollen for so many of our insects through the summer months are now providing seed for the birds. And this garden is just suddenly coming alive with birds as we speak. It's absolutely fantastic. So to have that vegetation there, it provides A, cover, and B, a food source for all the birds, and also for all the larvae. And for things like ladybirds, they'll often overwinter in the dead stems of things like the knapweed if they're large enough to hollow out a little bit. You know, earwigs and all sorts of insects will use the stems of these plants, like I say, for cover over the winter months. So if you remove that in October time, you've got October, November, December, January, February, March, 6 months where there could be vegetation for things to overwinter in. So if you want to cut back any of this vegetation, which I would recommend you do, some of in the spring, I would recommend doing it in, say, March time, even into April, once you start seeing what's known as the basal rosettes, the green foliage coming up from the base of these plants. You know, just get down, have a look in the bottom, and you see once the leaves start coming up, cut the stems back to, you know, 2, 3, 4 inches. It doesn't matter, they'll die off in time, but don't cut them right down to the ground completely, because you would then maybe cut all the rest of the vegetation. So, you know, it's only purely for aesthetics. You've got to think to yourself, these plants have survived for millennia in the wild without us intervening, you know, so they don't need to be cut back year after year. It's just helping to let a lot of the kind of the spring plants flower, because the way I plant these wildlife ponds, and if you followed my techniques, there'll be an array of wildflowers which will flower from the spring right the way through until the end of summer. So things like the ragged robin, the cuckoo flower, the more delicate plants that are out sort of April, May time, obviously they don't want loads of vegetation overcrowding them. So if you can cut them back earlier on, that's probably better, sort of in March time, as I say. So the vegetation is a really, really nice addition to this side of the garden, of which there's the herbaceous border over there, which again you can see, you know, the house sparrows and the dunnock. We've had the dunnock in there again this morning. They love it, and it's just cover. You know, if, as everybody else seems to do, well, not everybody, I'm generalising a bit, but most people as gardeners will be taught to cut that lot back in the autumn, and then the sparrows won't be there. You know, birds need cover. It's as simple as that, because the sparrowhawks that we get over here, and if you're in the States, you've got sharp-shinned hawks, you've got the roadside hawks, those sorts of things. Very noisy carrion crow. And then you know, these things will be open to predation, so they're only going to be where there is cover for the birds. So the vegetation around the margins is absolutely key for providing that habitat and that cover for them, and also, like I say, throughout the rest of the garden, which we'll come on to again in another video. So moving on from that, you can see these margins around here. If I step back a bit, Phil can have a look at that. These margins are shorter, you'll notice, and the reason being is that from Phil's kitchen window, he wants to, rather selfishly I think, see some of the birds that visit. So so that's kept a bit shorter, but it's still not cut all the way down. There's a little bit of growth there where, you know, the sort of the froglets or anything like that that come out in the warmer days in winter can actually hunt through to find some insects and food. So I think that's absolutely fine, and it's a nice mix. One of the key things about any wildlife garden is to have a mosaic of habitats, so short grass, long grass. You know, it really does help to provide a natural food source and some natural habitats. So that's a really nice addition, and I think it's nice to have that bit of a vista through to the rest of the wildlife pond. If I come around here again, the next point I want to make, Phil, perhaps if you come around the other side, mate. Bit of sunlight there. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's good.
So the next point I want to make is about things like the lesser pond sedge, Carex acutiformis, which is this cracking bit of vegetation here, which absolutely is essential for things like your dragonfly and your damselfly larvae, for them when they emerge as a larvae out of the pond and then they split out of their cases and they obviously spread their wings, same as a butterfly would, out of their chrysalis. You know, they will in time need that vegetation to climb up on. So if we don't have this, you know, they're going to struggle to fight. They've got to try and do it in the grass where they're lower down, they're more liable to predation from birds and that sort of thing. If they can get out over the water. Morning. You carry on. No, you're fine, don't worry. So yeah, so the larvae want the vegetation to crawl out on. So if we can, it's best to leave some of this, because that will provide a great habitat for them to emerge on, and then you can often find the kind of the spent cases, if you like, afterwards, still clung on to like a skeleton of their former self, which is absolutely brilliant. I love showing, you know, my kids and well, any kids really just love looking at, like, you know, this kind of exoskeleton of an insect. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So the one thing I would say though is things like the lesser pond sedge can spread to create quite a reasonably sized lump or block of vegetation within a pond. So the best way to do this, and I'm not going to attempt it now because my hands are cold already, is feel down to the base of the plant and just gently, kind of slowly, a bit of a gentle rocking motion. If you've used the methods that I use to create these wildlife ponds, your pond will have subsoil in it, so hopefully these plants will just tease out in time. Same with the greater reed mace, or the bulrushes if you like. So it's just one way you can look at that. And if you want to know more about maintaining bulrushes, then I have done another video along with blanket weed, which I'll put a link to at the end of this video. So the lesser pond sedge, that can become a bit of a clump, and it's just about a bit of management. Blanket weed, again, I've covered in another video, so I won't touch on the blanket weed today. In the winter time, it's not really going to be an issue anyway, because it's cooler temperatures, of course. And other than that, I can't really think of much else you need to do. There really isn't a lot of maintaining of one of these wildlife ponds. I think they are a really, really easy and simple structure to maintain. They don't take a lot of work. They're less effort than, you know, filtration systems, koi ponds, you know, all that kind of nonsense. Get one of these in your garden. You don't need fish ponds. They are absolutely brilliant. And look at that. It's just a natural habitat that's right in the middle of a back garden. You could pick this up and you could dump it in the middle of a nature reserve and it would look as if it's been there for 100 years, the same as if it does in this back garden. So I absolutely love wildlife ponds. I can't think of any better habitat that you guys could look to create in your own garden to attract wildlife. They are just teeming with life, from, you know, all the insects that feed on the nectar plants around them, you know, the butterflies, the bees, the moths, the hoverflies, the flies even, you know, right the way through to the birds that bathe and drink, the hedgehogs that visit to drink, you know, foxes, badgers in the right settings, dragonflies, damselflies, all the obvious, newts, frogs, toads. I don't need to go on. It really does provide everything that any form of life could need. Water is the source of all life at the end of the day. So I really can't recommend you guys having one of these ponds in your garden highly enough. And obviously, if you've got any questions, guys, do drop them in the comments below. I'll be happy to answer them. But the best part is just go out and enjoy it. Don't worry about it looking untidy. Don't worry about what the neighbours think. You know, if you're in this for the long run and you're in this for the right reasons and you're doing it for wildlife, then you won't be bothered about what it looks like. And personally, I'd rather look at that than a manicured lawn or anything else. So make one of these a focal point in the middle of your garden. I promise you won't be disappointed. I'm pretty sure Phil will agree with me by saying that he's had far too many hours of entertainment from his kitchen window whilst looking at this pond, eh Phil?
Plenty of pondside coffees on that wall.
There you go, yeah. And obviously this is raised because we've got a split level in the garden, but 99% of my ponds, well, it is ground level, it's just on a higher level. So Phil's got kind of a unique situation, which, to be honest, I wouldn't mind myself. Anyway, from here in a rather cool but beautiful South Wales, it's goodbye for now, and thank you so much for watching, guys. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to the channel, give the video a like, and I'll be sure to bring you many more videos on all the ways in which you can help wildlife in videos to come. And if you're looking to build a wildlife pond, then please do check out some of the other videos on the channel where I've done a 3-part series on exactly how you can make one of these habitats in your own garden. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you soon.